welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen. And today I am here with the author of several things, but of a gorgeous work of short stories, a collection of short stories that I am so excited to discuss. So welcome. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Oh yeah, thank you, Jen. So my name's Karen Bender. I've written 5 works of fiction, 3 short story collections, and my most recent one is The Words of Dr. L. And my other collections, I have two novels. My first one is called Like Normal People. My second was A Town of Empty Rooms. My third one, Refund, was a National Book Award finalist. My first collection of stories that got published and longlisted for the Story Prize. And my other 2 books also were longlisted for the Story Prize. So yeah, so I love writing. I love writing fiction, and I especially love writing short stories. So happy to talk.
Which one, where did you start? Did you start with short stories and move into novels or vice versa?
Yeah, great question. So when I first started writing, kind of more seriously in college, I really did love stories. And it was actually the 80s. It was a time of a great short story kind of renaissance. You have Deborah Eisenberg, Ann Beatty, Tama Janowitz, so many really great short story writers out there. And what I did is I worked on stories and I published a couple. And then when I went to grad school, what I kept hearing is you have to have a novel to publish. Like short stories always have this bias against them. So I did have a novel idea I wanted to work on, and so I started working on that. That was Like Normal People. But interestingly, and I really had no idea how to write a novel, and so I when I had my 600-page first draft that I had no idea what to do with, I thought, well, I do know how to write stories. I'm going to try and organize some of this, like a chapter or some section into a story. So I did actually. I put a couple of chapters together. I had a beginning and end, and I sent it out, and it actually kind of what really was a big opening for my career. It got published in Granta, and then was in Best American Short Stories. So it was interesting. The short story helped me actually with my novels. So then I kept working on stories, and my second book was actually also a novel that I was supposed to sell with the stories, but it was hard to sell both of them. But finally, then I did publish Refund, and that was actually my most successful book. It was interesting. So I love writing. I love writing both, but stories are just sort of close to my heart because they give you a chance to kind of try things out in this smaller canvas. So, with all my books, like I started out as a realist, and now I was working more speculative arena. But, in the book, I could try different things in each story, and I just love that.
Yeah, I really love short stories. I love novels too, but I love short stories and reading collections as an experience because there's a lot of freedom. There's kind of one way to read a novel, front
Yeah,
front to
yeah.
back. But short stories you can visit in a number of ways. You can read it through, you can sort of dip in and out, you can read them in order, you can go out of order. And so I really love how a collection sort of presents you with a bunch of different sides of an author as well. So in this case, for the words of Dr. L, how did you know it was time for another collection?
Yeah. Well, I think I write, generally kind of all the time to kind of help me figure out my life. Writing to me is really cathartic. It really helps me grapple with things that are difficult and I want to figure out. And so I'm always writing something. And so with the words of Dr. L, I had finished my second collection, The New Order, and I think I was just trying to figure out what to talk about next. And so I started working on some of these more speculative stories, and they were really fun. And they seemed to be okay. It seemed to I felt, the world was not crashing down because I was trying something new, which is great. As a writer, you don't have to feel siloed. So, yeah, so I just kept working on them. And then at a certain point, I sent them to my agent, who sent them to my editor, who was like, yeah, this is, he was a little surprised that my work was kind of going in this direction a little bit. So, he wanted me to write a few more stories, and then some of the newer ones were a little bit more realistic, which I think kind of balanced it a little bit. And so then it did feel like a complete book.
What I like particularly about the particular combination of short stories and speculative fiction is that the stories become these sort of exercises in efficient world building.
Uh-huh.
And to me, a really good example of that is the story Helicopters. It's super brief. It's like 8 pages or 9 pages or so, but there is this really fascinating world suggested like in those very few pages, all through like sort of one moment in this woman's life. So can you talk a little bit about that story and particularly world building and like how you decide what to show, what to hint at, and what to kind of leave obscure?
I'm so glad you asked about that story because no one asks about it. It's such a, I mean, that's such a, it's a really weird story. And it actually was inspired by a dream. I actually had a dream that there was this giant helicopter at our window, and it was really scary. Like I woke up like screaming from that dream. It felt really ominous. And so I started writing about it, and I think that was a story. That voice, I think, was a little like, who is it inspired by? I think I was reading Lucia Berlin. I was maybe reading Clarice Lispector, Roberto Bolaño. These kind of associative first person voices, um, where there's actually often a little bit of sense of danger underneath, especially Bolaño. So that was kind of fun to play with. And then it starts out, this, we don't really know where this woman is, but then we get the sense of, then there's this threat, and then there's like this food shortage, and then there's this potential war. So I think you realize how little you need to suggest a world, actually, which I think is interesting as a writer.
Yeah, I like how stories can serve as a sort of like a photograph or a snapshot that sort of suggests the wider world and what's happening before and during and after. And
Mm,
that one is such a, yeah, controlled exercise in world building that it really is quite impressive.
yeah.
Um, so in terms of the title story, The Words of Dr. L, this is a question I asked at the book festival. I'm always really curious about how a story earns the position of title story. Is it that it exemplifies the volume or like your thesis or your central idea in some way? Tell me about that story and sort of how you select it to represent the volume.
Good question. I mean, I just kind of like the title. I just think a title should kind of suggest a question, and I feel like that suggests like, what are the words and who's Dr. L? So I think it does that. But actually thinking about the collection, I do feel like the idea of words or listening are sometimes woven in some of the stories. In the courtroom of the invisible, there's words in that story where a courtroom, it's sort of a complicated story, but there like words involved in that, and there's words in the listener, which is about a therapist. So I feel like there is this, it's kind of a subconscious thing that's woven in, the idea of words, communication, listening a little bit throughout the collection.
And it's also the opening story, the first one
Yeah,
in the volume.
yeah.
So I'd love to use that to ask a question about the arc of a collection, how
Mm.
you order the stories. Are you suggesting, like, again, a thesis or an argument or an emotional movement? Or is it more like, is it like putting a playlist together? Like, is it all vibes? Like,
Right. No, that's a great question. So I'm not good at organizing my stories. I mean, I tend to sort of let my editor, Dan Smetanka, do that. I don't know. I mean, but I did feel like The Words of Dr. L should be the first one, just because I feel like it's good to lead with a really story that's really strong. And I do feel like with my collections, I started with a story that I thought, would bring the reader in. Because everything with a writer is, how do you like funnel attention toward your work? You have so much competition, other books that are TV, internet, and so what is something that will bring a reader in? So I felt like that was a strong story, so I really wanted to lead with that. And also established there would be like other speculative works in here. The Hypnotist is also a story that I felt good about. And it felt, that's the second story, and it's also realist. So then you kind of see, in a way, those are the rules of the collection. It's going to go back and forth between realist and speculative. Then otherwise, why are they where they are? Honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, in certain ways, I think you could say it's a little bit about, it's about separation of parents and children at different points of life. So you could see there's an age sort of arc in it. Separation's about two young girls and a friendship, and one is going to separate because she's going to go off in a rocket to another to Mars to live on Mars. The Extra Child is about empty nest, but there's like a child in it. Arlene is Dead is about aging. The Court of the Invisible is kind of a little bit about taking care of a aging parent. Data is about conflict between a mother and a teenager, and Globes is about separation from parents and a young adult child, and also about aging. So I think there was maybe an age arc that kind of went through it. Yeah.
It's really interesting how you can suggest that sort of like, yeah, the ages of man, from birth till the end. But there is like a sort of you do also achieve the contrast between like the, sort of more speculative stories and the more realist ones, and tone differences between stories as well. I think it's really interesting the way that collections can sort of like, because you're looking for resonances as you put stories next to each other, but also for that sense of contrast and a movement. And yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, and also just as a writer, I just feel like I really like engaging all different parts of me. As like Data is a story that's kind of dreamlike and kind of eerie. I want to try out that kind of language. Arlene is Dead is more kind of funny. Messengers was kind of like trying, kind of a Ursula in conversation with Ursula Le Guin. So it's like, you think about, these different elements of you as a writer, and you really, that's another thing about the short stories, you can try them out. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there one that was, an experiment or trying something out new that felt like a particular challenge or was particularly hard won in the end?
Mm. The court, I mean, it's interesting. The Court and Invisible was a hard story, but ultimately I feel happy with it. So that's about this culture where you have people are starting to become so uncivil to each other in just daily life that it causes people to become invisible or start dimming, and it really, and it's about kind of harm that we people do to each other in daily life. And so, and what people are doing are not literally crimes, but they're just like stealing a parking space or grabbing the last bottle of medicine, just the things that are, kind of late stage capitalism greed. And so, so that story, I think I had read an article in the paper about some court where you had like a fake court and they would sentence people in some odd way. It was sort of interesting. And I thought, well, what if the solution to this invisibility is that you have a court that tells that where the people come in and the judges say that the perpetrator is guilty, and somehow hearing that, the people then regain their physical presence. So in a way, I feel it's actually, talking about words, that was like a word element in the story. In an interesting way, it's also, I feel, a little bit about therapy. You come in feeling somehow invisible or diminished, and somehow having your feelings validated, or it makes you feel, more whole. So I feel like it took a long time to make that world feel kind of believable and get the logistics of it. And then also then it's about the sort of real life issue the woman has, is helping her, having time to go see her aging mother. And so balancing all that was hard, and also was long. But I think, over drafts it came together, and then I felt like I kind of was doing what I wanted.
Mm. Yeah, there's a really interesting contrast there between like this sort of like the magical realist, almost like expressionist idea of people dimming as they lose their civility or humanity. But then when you pair that with this very realist, like, all right, bureaucratically, how would this
Right,
work? It's really, really
right.
interesting.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's in a way that's, being a realist is helpful in that, I think, because I have to feel, it's like I have to ground the sort of strangeness. Yeah.
So, what are you working on now? Are you writing stories? Are you working towards a novel? What's on your horizon?
Great question. So one thing I am working on now is a craft book, because I've been teaching for many years, and I just thought I have so much, that I have, stored up teaching and talking to my students about. And I really, want to get it down. And so over the last year, I've been writing this craft book, which I'm calling Hugging the Buttered Elephant, which is basically how I feel writing is, or writing a novel, or even a story is, that you're trying to get your arms around this elephant that is slippery and you just can't. It's really hard. So that's kind of like, and it's like both kind of memoir, kind of personal experience, becoming a writer and advice, and also craft lessons.
Wow, that
So
sounds
yeah, yeah.
great. And what an
Oh,
amazing
good.
image.
Oh,
That's
good.
really,
I'm so glad. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So I'm trying to finish that. And then after that, I'm trying to figure out, right, the next fiction project, which, I have some ideas, but I'm trying to kind of figure out which should be which I want to stay with, for a course of time, because that's a thing about writing is you are then, in something for a while. So,
That's true. You have to think about, yeah, you're going to be living with this for a long
right.
time, and you have to make
Yeah.
sure that like the enthusiasm you feel at the outset will sustain you.
Well, right, because
Yeah.
there are times when it won't. I
Yeah.
mean, it's interesting. I've done a lot of stories. I have this idea now. I want to try like a short novel, like not, like I always get afraid of writing. I never feel afraid of writing stories. Like I'm just gonna try this. But novels just are such a commitment. So I feel like, is there a way to try like a short novel? So I've been kind of thinking about that.
Nice.
I don't
Do,
know.
do you feel like teaching? I love talking to people who also teach
Yeah.
because I was an instructor as well before I came to
Oh,
libraries. So
oh, wow.
do you feel like teaching has changed either your process or your writing interests?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I think teaching, having to try and explain things to students is, always a challenge. And really the best guides are great writers. So, I mean, what I do is I bring in short stories or novels by writers I love, and then we try and dissect them and see what makes them work. And, I try to just show them and just show moments that I think are amazing, and then basically trying to be in conversation with them. So I think, trying to, look at great stories and see why they work, is always helpful. And then I think, yeah, like, trying to explain plot was really hard for me for a while. And then I kind of came up with my own ideas about plot and kind of how it worked. And so it helped me to figure out, yeah, I think the process of trying to explain things to students will help me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it forces you to clarify your thinking in a lot of ways, I think. Like
Yeah.
a lot of things that sort of, you feel your way around when you are trying to articulate the process to another person. You make it tangible for them, but also for yourself in a way.
Totally. Right, right. I mean, right. Because I mean, I mean, I think one thing as a teacher that has, trying to be a teacher that is, helpful is like, I really want to, not just say, this is great, or just, yay, because I think it's not really helpful to students. So I think really trying to see, what will help them in terms of using specifics, for example, like how do you go beyond abstractions? How do you use specifics? How do you find something original? I think this is a big thing with student work is how do you help them find something original that they can do that hasn't been done, which is really the key, I think. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, I'm very excited to see your craft book and
Oh,
whatever,
good.
yeah, what is in the future. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and our listeners. It's been really lovely.
Oh, yeah, great. Thank you, Jen.
So, listeners, please check out The Words of Dr. L and Other Stories. It's available at bookstores, libraries, websites, wherever you like to go for your books. Do you have a favorite bookstore or website, perhaps, where you like to send folks for books?
Oh, I mean, any independent bookstore is good, particularly, but bookshop.org, was it bookshop.com or org? Also is a place to buy books that also funnels revenue to independent bookstores. So I would encourage people to do that first. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, once again. It is now time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.